Welcome, everybody, to an emergency edition of Qué Golazo. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Heath Pearce, and we're here to discuss the unfortunate news from yesterday that no U.S. men's national team fan wanted to hear. Weston McKennie is injured, and it's looking like he's going to be out for 8 to 12 weeks with a broken foot, and that means he'll most likely miss next month's World Cup qualifiers. It means he probably will absolutely miss next month's World Cup qualifiers, along with maybe all of Juventus's season. Bad news, Heath Pearce. Give me your initial thoughts on what seems like the last thing we needed going into some massive games to try to qualify for a World Cup.
Yeah, and Jimmy, I don't recall our conversation specifically from the Usmnt hour this week, but I know that we talked about, will there be a player that misses the World Cup through injury, like a key player? And we both sort of suggested yes, because it's just the natural part of the game. Obviously, I don't expect him to miss the World Cup. You never know what happens 10 months from now, but it's certainly a huge knock on the U.S. The upside, Jimmy, is we've already started tinkering with our lineup a little bit of saying, where does Weston McKennie? We talked about this actually on the Champions League recap show. Where is he better as a winger? Is he better in the midfield? Is he better as an 8.5? And while it's a huge loss to the U.S. because he was top of my power rankings, I think he was top of yours in terms of performance. He's got that game changer, X factor. He's got all those things that the national team needs, especially going into this window. It's going to be a massive loss for the national team. I don't, when we've started to tinker with the team, very rarely do we say, well, Weston McKennie doesn't fit in, except for the time that he was suspended from the national team, right? We had to make do. But since he's come back, he's sort of the sure starter in an MMA, except maybe Musa's out or Adams doesn't play or whoever. Weston's sort of that shoo-in in terms of the starting lineup. And so I want your take on, what's the replacement here? Is it a wholesale formation change? I'm assuming it's not that, but where does the team shift to? We saw De La Torre get some minutes. We know that maybe Gio Reyna would have been a great option to have back, and maybe Brendan Aronson can come inside. There's a number of ways that you can play it, but each one of those that I start to kind of like move pieces around, I start to go, well, that's not as good. And that's not as good. And it makes me start to realize just how important Weston McKennie is to the national team right now.
No, these are great questions. And obviously we have a few weeks to digest this information. And so does Gregg Berhalter and his staff to try to figure out the best way forward. What I will say is we've played 11 World Cup qualifiers so far. And Weston McKennie has only played in 7 of those. So it's not like we've been dependent on him in every single game. However, in the 4 games that he missed, Canada game was 1-1. We had the lead in that one and gave it up. Then we played against Honduras, down in Honduras. We were down 1-0. And that's the game where Gregg Berhalter smartly made some changes at halftime, not only to our player selection. He made 3 subs at half, but also to our formation, which unlocked Honduras. And as we know now, Honduras is pretty bad. And we ended up scoring 4 goals in the second half, which gave Greg a ton of breathing room. And then he played at home against Jamaica. Then he missed the Panama away game. And that was another one where we made 7 or 8 wholesale changes from that one. We did beat Jamaica. We're still kind of, I feel like we still have whiplash from that, making that many changes, at least as us as pundits. Mm-hmm. And then the other game that he missed was in Jamaica, the 1-1 draw. So in the 4 games that he's missed, we only have 1 win, which could have gone the other direction, 2 draws and 1 loss. And yeah, that's not great. And I think we do miss his presence. And I do think we've tried different players in that position who can't do what he can do for all the things that you mentioned, not only in his tremendous ability to go box to box and to be that X factor, but to be someone who's clutch, who knows when to join the attack, is starting to get better and better at making those decisions as to maybe when to stay home or to provide an option on top of the box or a little bit deeper. And then also when to just I'm going for it. We don't necessarily have somebody like him. We can name De La Torre, we can name Musa, but they're not like McKennie. McKennie's got some of these other intangibles, and he's very good in the air too. So anybody you bring in, can they replicate what he can do in the air? It's not that easy. So as we're seeing here on the screen right now, and I'll just read it out. Juventus, as of this recording, has not announced anything about Weston's injury, but our very own Fabrizio Romano has come out and already said that he suffered the rupture of the 2nd and 3rd metatarsal of his left foot, and it's bad news for Juve and the U.S. men's national team. Yeah, thanks for the Captain Obvious shout at the end, Fabrizio. But I don't know. I don't know if there's a like for like. I honestly feel like it's going to have to be opponent based at this point. I think we might just put in somebody different against Mexico. The Panama game at home is the one that matters. You know, if we beat Panama at home, we're going to qualify. So do you put in somebody there who's a little bit more industrious to make sure that nobody's not doing their job at all times, and that we don't maybe put in, not to say we have a luxury player, but somebody who might be looking a little bit more forward, and his instincts are more to go forward than they are to go back. I don't know. These are really difficult decisions, and this injury is significant to our team.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, you know, I'm playing Doogie Howser here on sort of how to repair those, because, you know, stress fractures or fractures on the fifth metatarsal, they'll put screws and bolts in to get you back going again. I'm not sure for the second, third what the actual, and Jimmy, I don't know if you broke when you broke your foot, was it one of those metatarsals in the middle as well, or
So I broke a sesamoid, which is there's two little bones under your big toe. Mm-hmm. And I broke the one on the right. I made a great tackle, because that's what I do. I make great tackles. That's my flex of the day. And as I was pushing back up, the guy fell back onto my foot that was pushing up, and it broke one of those little bones. There's no flexion there. You can't push off anymore if you break one of those. I mean, it's so tiny, these little bones, but if you break a bone in your foot, it's trouble. And for him to break potential double fracture of a second and third metatarsal is significant. Now, a lot of people break their fifth metatarsal. It's the one on the outside. It's
usually it's a stress fracture.
Stress fracture, right? Yeah. So it's not as clean cut. But yeah, this one, I was hoping like 6 to 8 weeks, but 8 to 12. You just have to give the bones a time to heal. And at that point, I think you got to shut him down. Like, why rush him back at that point when the season's almost coming to a close? I don't know. It's and for us, it's the same, right? We're either going to qualify or we don't. So there's not going to be any reason to rush him back for some friendlies. I mean, this is going to be a very important summer for Weston McKennie, but obviously we got to do the job and qualify first.
Yeah, this is a huge, you know, loss, as I've mentioned. Obviously, when we look with regard to him and Gio Reyna, both key members of the national team, going back to the summer, you start to feel a little bit different. Now, this team's been able to get results, right? And like you said, only one win without Weston McKennie. But I do think one of the upsides of Gregg Berhalter's decisions to rotate as much as he has is he has a better picture of who he can call upon right now. Now, I'm not saying at the time it was the right thing to do to make all those changes. In fact, it drove me crazy when he was making all those changes. However, now you've got a deeper pool of players that you can say, okay, maybe this is the right thing. I mean, think about just the moving possibilities. You have your ability to say, okay, put in Kellen Acosta and Tyler Adams together with Yunus Musa. Don't like it. But if it's a defensive type of setup, maybe it's the right thing to do. I don't think we have any build-up play when we have that type of team out there. In fact, when, you know, we've both complained heavily when Adams and Acosta are on the field together, because they sort of offset each other in their style of play, the spaces they like to get into. But then you have, you know, maybe can Christian Pulisic come inside underneath and be more central and connected to a striker? Can you change the formation a little bit so you're not just high and wide, depending on the opponent, because you want a team away there? Or maybe Brent Aronson can come inside. Or maybe now you've got Pulisic inside and Jordan Morris is on one side. And just thinking through options in real time on what can happen. Again, I think we fall short of what our best team is anytime that we do that, because of just the impact that Weston McKennie has had on this national team. And the form that he's in is the most important part right now for me, is that it's really hard. And I've had this in my career where you finally feel good. You feel great mentally. You feel great physically. You're performing really, really well. And then something you can't control happens, right? And this is sort of the mentality of an athlete, of having to be able to bounce back and go through these types of things, is that a lot of times it's just you in your own head fighting with yourself to get better, to improve. Maybe it's a coach or whatever. And then things get really, really good. And it's not long till you kind of fall off the top of this mountain of like mentally good. Physically, I'm playing really, really well. And now I've got another injury and a setback. And I know Gio Reyna is going through the same thing, but Weston McKennie's now got to go through this at this point in his career. And he's had a few little knocks, but this is a big one, right? Where everything was going perfectly, turned the corner from the past national team. Life is great. He's performing well. He's pretty much a starter at Juventus. He's a sure starter in the national team, one of the best. And now an injury has set him back likely 3 months, maybe even more, depending on how a foot heals, because you're talking about bones. And once they're bones, you have a little less control as to sort of how the bone heals, and then also how everything heals around it or sort of falls back into place.
No, that's really good insight. I think the one thing that I take away from this, if there's a positive here, is that with Gio Reyna out, and when we missed Christian Pulisic for a while, it gave other players, to your point before about the depth of our player pool, a chance to emerge. Had all those guys been healthy, would we be counting on or thinking about Brenden Aaronson the same way? Probably not. And Timo Weah is another player that's really stepped up and taken his opportunity. And so there are some silver linings here. Now, when I look at the lineups though that we chose as a replacement for some of these games without Weston McKennie, and I'll go with the first one, Honduras or Canada. I'll have to look at the Canada game, but because that one was like, holy crap, that happened so quickly. But down in Honduras, that's when Gregg put Tyler Adams at right back and Kellen Acosta like on the right side of midfield. And like, I think we were just trying to lock down their left side. I have no idea. That didn't work out. Obviously, we made some changes and shifted a few things. But Tyler Adams stayed at right back, still found a place for him. I don't think we're going to see that anymore, just because some of our other right backs have really emerged as guys. And then in Panama, there was no Tyler Adams in that particular game. I think maybe he was hurt. You got Yunus Musa, Acosta, and Leggett played in the midfield. So you can already see, but that was the Panama game where he made 8 changes, right, from the win against Jamaica. And then against Jamaica. So in Jamaica, where I feel like we've gotten a little bit farther along, this is the last game that Weston McKennie missed, right? So we're already 6 or 7 games in. We're starting to finalize who our team is and what we're about. You had Adams, you had Musa, and he actually elected to go with Busio that game. And I remember him being fine, but I don't remember him ever kind of crushing it, right? Or making that one play that unlocked a lot of different things. So again, I feel like it's going to be situational. But when I think about Mexico, say we have Adams and Musa, who is that third person there? I just don't know. I mean,
that one you could go. Mexico's the one I'm less worried about, right? Like, okay, because so it's going to be a little bit of a wash. To me, it's about the Panama game. Like, who's your lineup that you're rolling out? Because you got to take more chances in that. Yeah, you're the better team, but Panama are great as well. And Panama are playing to keep you from going to a World Cup. So you're going to have to, it's going to be a little more of this chess match of who opens up. Do we have the patience? Do we have the emotional IQ of knowing when to take our chances to go forward? When do we have that balance? And Weston has that clutch gene, right? Of like, hey, team's not playing well, put the ball in a good spot. I'll get us this win. You know, he has that ability where he can find a way to get the team results, even if we're not playing at our best or creating a ton of opportunities. Now, I think Panama could disrupt that for long periods of time. And I'm just wondering who do you think, right? You can like, just to give a quick list of De La Torre, you have Leggett, who's kind of seems to be much further down the pecking order. You have Busio that could step in there. You have Acosta if you wanted to have another have your third midfielder in there. I'm trying to think of who else we have potentially to go into that midfield spot.
There's a part of me that thinks this. What if you kind of gave, let's say you put Acosta in that spot. So it's Acosta, Adams, and Musa, which producer Des found when we played Canada at home, and McKennie was kind of a late scratch in that one after all of his behavioral issues. It was Acosta, Adams, and Leggett. You bring in Musa, though, and you got somebody who can probably run between the lines a little better than Leggett and can probably do a few things a little bit better than Leggett. And if you brought in Acosta, which I'm not the biggest fan, because as you mentioned before, Acosta and Adams kind of replicate each other. But if you had Acosta slide a little bit left and you let Anthony Robinson, who has a natural instinct to bomb forward, then Acosta could just naturally slide into cover for him. And maybe Anthony Robinson is kind of your de facto, but it's more out wide. I mean, Weston McKennie gives you that support centrally, right? He makes those runs centrally. I mean, he'll drift, of course, and I think that makes him unpredictable and helps our attack be a little bit more unpredictable. But there is something to be said for, okay, if you wanted to try it against Mexico and have Acosta just sit there a little bit, and they can almost act as a double pivot, and you allow Musa and maybe Robinson to jump a little bit higher. I don't know. I'm just trying to be creative here because I do think that Acosta could play a pretty vital role, but I don't want it to be at the expense of us not being able to attack with real purpose.
Well, you go back to the Nations League final, and Acosta, once he figured out where the spaces or the gaps were on the field, I thought that he was pretty good at being able to understand, I've got to check into this space, and then my next ball, my first touch or my second touch, has to skip the lines to break their sort of fake or half press. And I think that is when we started to be able to get the ball higher up the field. I agree with you in terms of Acosta covering ground for Robinson.
That's just something to think about. Yeah.
But my worry is that, like, what happens in our build-up play? Like, can we actually go through the middle, or are we going to be skipping lines and battling for second balls or coughing up the ball in bad spots? Because we know Tyler Adams coughs up the ball in bad spots once or twice a game. We know Kellen Acosta can do the same thing. Now, in that last game, he was fantastic. But my worry is that...
But he's good at set pieces as well. I think that's another...
There's a huge argument for that, for sure.
For bringing Acosta in. He was dropping dimes. Now, the crazy part is our best target on set pieces is Weston McKennie. With all due respect to Walker Zimmerman and Miles Robinson, who have shown their propensity as well to get on the end of set pieces, Weston McKennie always seems to find himself in and around the ball. And he scored that really important goal against Honduras early on, which took off a lot of pressure because he has that clutch gene. He likes to show up in big moments. So we're missing him in a lot of different ways. And now it's just going to be more and more emphasis on Walker Zimmerman and whoever other our center back is to get on the end of stuff. And I know Walker scored one, but it's a bit of a scrum. It wasn't like the ball fell to him as opposed to him getting his head on it per se. But we know he's good in the air. We've seen it long enough. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But if you had Acosta, Adams, and Musa, I just think there is a way, because Anthony Robinson does have a tendency to bomb forward, maybe when he shouldn't, when the ball's on the other side of the field, and then maybe not picking his spots as well, where Acosta could cover that, and I'd feel really comfortable. So even if Acosta dropped into the left back and Anthony Robinson recovered into the central spot, I still think I'd be okay with that, because we're providing some type of attack where we're a little bit more balanced on both sides, especially if we have Dest on the right. If we become really one-sided and we can't play through the middle, Heath, that's going to cause some problems for us.
Yeah, I mean, my final thing is like I like that against Mexico. I don't like that against Panama, right? I think it's too balanced against Panama, or you're relying too much on just your few attackers to create against Panama. And I think Panama won't sit too deep in the blocks against the U.S. I think they're trying to play. They're trying to get points. They're trying to qualify for a World Cup. So I think that's going to be a different dynamic than we've seen against some of the other opponents. So I would like something a little more attacking minded, maybe a Brendan Aronson in the midfield there, or even Pulisic playing sort of the 10 in a middle three, where we can have some other options around, where maybe you get Brendan Aronson on the field with Timo Weah and,
I'd like that. I'd like to see that.
Jordan Peacock up top. But like just trying something a little more attacking, where I know somebody that's going to put in the shift in there. Obviously, Pulisic's not going to necessarily track back as much in that 10 position, but something a little more attacking minded, of like, hey, we're going to dictate the play here instead of sort of the trade-off or the balance. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking more Mexico when we're away from home in a tough place, and they're going to try to dictate the terms with regard to Acosta. But I do like that shout. It can be a Busio, it can be a De La Torre, but I also like what maybe Aronson does in particular a little bit better. And I'd almost prefer him in the 10 spot than Pulisic, who does kind of want to find and drift a little bit more. And I just think Aronson will do the work on that side of the ball. If you tell Aronson, I need you to run through that brick wall and tackle that dude for 90 minutes, I just feel like he's going to do it. Not to say the other guys wouldn't because of what's at stake, but Aronson just seems to have that more of a natural inclination to do that. So if you just told Musa to hold a little bit more and sit a little bit closer off the shoulder of Tyler Adams, and then you had an Aronson kind of at the point of that triangle, and then you had a Pulisic, a Weah, and a Pepe, or whoever's our hot hand up top, I like that, because it's putting some pressure on Panama to have to be perfect defensively. And we know that they're not, and they do give up opportunities. Now we just need enough players out there to take advantage of those.
Jimmy, I know we're going to wrap this up, but I want to just plant this seed. What if Gregg goes back to a back three?
Well, he could. That's not a bad shout, to be honest. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's just going to add another 20 minutes to this podcast. But no, that's more than possible. You could roll that out. I just wonder who's going to be in the middle. I assume Zimmerman would maybe be the likely choice, kind of pulling the strings and organizing and getting the ball out. And then you have Chris Richards and Miles Robinson on either side of you. You got Anthony up high, Dest. I mean, those are two wing backs. You sit Adams right in front of you. I feel like you need a double pivot with three. So maybe that's Musa in this particular instance, but you have to sacrifice somebody else, one of the wingers. I don't know who I mean, I guess it'd be Pulisic or.
Yeah, it's just food for thought. I've never liked this national team when we play in the back three. I think it takes us way too long, and by the time that we start to solve the problems, we go to a back four and we do so much better. Yeah. And again, I don't think we're as deep at the back three in terms of the ability to play through. I think your guys next to Walker Zimmerman need to be really good on the ball. I think Robinson's there. I don't know if him and Chris Richards are good enough on the ball in the build-up play for us to be comfortable in that for long periods, but just wanted to, food for thought.
No, it's great. I actually like that you brought that up, because we tried to do it in the Nations League final against Mexico, and it was unlucky. McKenzie ended up giving up a bad ball. We fought our way back, so it happens, but we didn't necessarily look all that comfortable. And I remember Dest and Pulisic on the left side, and that didn't really do much. We weren't really creating a lot in the run of play.
But the gaps weren't as big when we matched up with the back 3 or back 5 and to their back 5. It
That's
sort of
fair.
offset a lot of things versus, back 4 versus a back 3, and where those gaps start to open up against the Mexico side, especially at the Azteca. Now, granted, it's a different Azteca and different atmosphere and different time of year and all those things that are going to play factors. But yeah.
So much to dissect that we're going to have to leave for another time, everybody. So on behalf of producer Dez and, of course, Hollywood Heath Pearce, I'm Jimmy Conrad. We're wishing Weston McKennie the very, very best. And, of course, Gio Reyna as well. We didn't bring him much into the conversation, but we will moving forward. So keep it here at Qué Golazo. Hit like and subscribe if you're watching on the YouTubes, or if you find us on YouTubes, make sure you leave us a 5-star review and hit all the right buttons so that we can keep giving you the good stuff. And we'll see you next time. Later.